Now, this is what Republicans once criticized as picking winners and losers in the market. We don't do that in America. It has business and media leaders aghast. Some, still in this Trump bully environment, are afraid to say so in public. Others have indicated it, but nobody thinks this is fair. And I'm talking about this story, Trump eyeing interference in the epic battle that's shaping up for what is called here by The Economist the future of entertainment. They're referring to that huge deal we've been reporting on where Netflix is now trying to buy Warner Brothers for many, many billions of dollars. But now a MAGA billionaire ally in the Ellison family wants to get Warner in what they call a hostile bid that would potentially also determine the ownership of CNN. And while Trump has interfered in other ways and obviously is worried about comics like Kimmel, he apparently cares a lot about CNN and news. We've all seen that. I don't think you need a lot of examples to prove that. We're talking about control of major parts of the information ecosystem. Warner Brothers, of course, huge across movies and television. What they make matters. What they don't make, because politicians pressure them or request it, also matters. And Trump, of course, has also pressed tech companies to change their policies to favor him, ending fact-checking at Meta and other places. This hostile bid involves David Ellison, backed by his father, Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison, along with Elon Musk, is one of the richest people in the whole world. You can see all the different media that's consolidating here, along with the billionaire Bezos. The Ellisons already got control of CBS, which led to changes at their news division in 60 Minutes. Some journalists objected and resigned over it. And while I told you the First Amendment requires respect for free speech and press, instead of the required independence, Trump apparently wants to be kept regularly appraised of how the DOJ could probe this Netflix deal I'm telling you about, that according to reporting in the Journal.
You want to know what desperation looks like in real time? Picture this. A president who swept into office promising to fix everything, to make America affordable again, to drain the swamp and restore greatness, now standing in Pennsylvania trying to convince people that the economic disaster unfolding before their eyes isn't actually his fault. That's where we are tonight. Donald Trump took the stage in Mount Pocono, and let me tell you, this wasn't a victory lap. This was damage control. This was a man on defense, scrambling to explain why everything he promised has turned into exactly the opposite. Let's talk about what's really happening here, because the story beneath the surface is absolutely wild. Trump is facing something he hasn't had to deal with in a long time. Genuine political vulnerability driven by the one thing that cuts through all the noise and spin: people's wallets. Affordability has become the defining issue of American politics right now, and it just powered a Democratic sweep in last month's elections that should have every Republican strategist breaking out in cold sweats. Because here's the thing, when people can't afford groceries, when they're making impossible choices between paying rent and feeding their families, when they see prices that are higher than they've ever experienced in their entire lives, no amount of political theater can make that reality disappear. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. And Trump knows this. Oh, he absolutely knows this. That's why he's out there on this whole tour that's been marketed as his response to voter concerns about the economy. But here's what makes this fascinating. The tour itself is an implicit admission that he's in trouble. You don't do emergency economic messaging tours when things are going well. You don't scramble to explain yourself to voters when your policies are working. You do this when the wheels are coming off and you desperately need to regain control of the narrative before it completely destroys you. But before we even get to Pennsylvania, we need to talk about one of the strangest political moments I've seen in years. Trump had this absolutely bizarre meeting with Zoran Mamani, the Democratic socialist who just got elected mayor of New York. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. Donald Trump, the MAGA king himself, sat down with a Democratic socialist and not only listened to his progressive plans for New York, but actually talked them up. He praised ideas from someone who represents everything his base supposedly hates. And you could almost see it happening in real time during that meeting. Trump recognizing that this progressive politician has some kind of appeal, some connection to voters that he's currently lacking. The MAGA base went absolutely ballistic over this. They were confused, upset, betrayed. How dare their champion sit down with a socialist and nod along? But I think what we witnessed was something more interesting than just Trump being unpredictable. I think we saw the survival instinct of a politician who realizes he's deeply unpopular right now and is willing to try anything, even flirting with progressive policies if it might help him claw back some support. That's not strength. That's panic dressed up as open-mindedness. And he's got every reason to panic because the economic anxiety that's gripping this country isn't just affecting Democrats or independents or the mythical moderate middle. It's hitting his own voters. It's spreading across the political spectrum like wildfire because inflation and high prices don't care about your party registration. A gallon of milk costs the same whether you're wearing a MAGA hat or driving around with a coexist bumper sticker. The revolt against Trump's economic policies is coming from everywhere. From the left, obviously, from the broad, angry middle that's fed up with how rocky this first year has been, from the protesters concerned about what this administration is doing to our governmental institutions and the fabric of American democracy. But here's the kicker. It's also coming from people on the right who are discovering that loyalty to Trump doesn't make their grocery bills any cheaper. Let's rewind for a second because the contrast is important. Trump began this year riding high. He just pulled off what looked like a legitimate comeback election. He had momentum. He had his billionaire ally Elon Musk by his side. And together, they were pushing through these shockwave reforms. They were strong-arming concessions from businesses and law firms. If you put aside all questions of morality, ethics, legality, and constitutional governance, just looking at it purely politically, Trump seemed unstoppable in those first few months. He looked like he had the upper hand. But then everything started falling apart. Musk disappeared from the scene. The cuts that were supposed to transform government failed to materialize. Companies that had been surrendering to Trump's pressure started standing their ground. And I remember when Disney, under massive public pressure, stood up for Jimmy Kimmel after Trump tried to get him canceled. That felt like a turning point, a moment when the corporate world realized maybe they didn't have to keep caving to this bully after all. So now we arrive at tonight with Trump taking the stage in Pennsylvania, very much on defense, high prices everywhere, economic policy flailing in every direction, and get this, he's moving billions of dollars in taxpayer money to farmers to compensate them for the damage caused by his own tariffs. Think about that logic for a second. His tariffs are hurting American farmers so badly that he has to use our tax dollars to bail them out from the consequences of his own policies. Meanwhile, those same tariffs continue grinding on, driving up prices for Americans across every category of products you can imagine. Clothes, electronics, food, building materials, you name it, it costs more because of decisions Trump made. And the American people have absolutely noticed. The polling on this is devastating. When you ask people whether prices are now worse than ever, worse than they can remember at any point in their lives, 46% say yes. Now you might think, okay, maybe that's just people who don't like Trump being negative. But here's where it gets really interesting. 37% of Trump's own voters say the cost of living is worse than it's ever been. More than a third of the people who cast ballots for this man are telling pollsters that economic conditions under his watch are the worst they've personally experienced. You cannot spin people out of reality. You cannot gaslight them away from what they experience every single day when they go to the store and see the price tags. Trump understood this principle perfectly well when he was running against Kamala Harris. He hammered her relentlessly on inflation and affordability. High prices were his signature issue. He made it the centerpiece of his campaign, promising that he would fix everything and make America affordable again. Classic stuff. But now he's discovering that facing accountability for high prices when you're actually the one in charge is considerably harder than blaming someone else. Funny how that works, isn't it? And his response to this crisis has been to zigzag all over the place, constantly changing what he says about affordability, about inflation, about whether any of this is even real. Watch how his messaging has evolved, or more accurately, devolved. He starts by saying one of his top priorities is to quickly defeat inflation and make America affordable again. Standard campaign rhetoric. But then, as the pressure builds and people keep pointing out that his policies are making things worse, he pivots to attacking the very concept of affordability. He claims Democrats invented the word just to criticize him. He calls it a fake narrative, says the word doesn't mean anything to anybody, insists affordability is a con job by Democrats. This is gaslighting on a spectacular scale. He's literally trying to convince people that their legitimate concerns about being able to pay for basic necessities are just some made-up political talking point. But then in the next breath, he's back to promising he's making incredible strides to make America affordable again. He admits it's a word people are using, acknowledges it as important, then circles back to calling it a mess he inherited. The whiplash from all this contradictory messaging is incredible. He can't decide if affordability is a fake issue invented by his enemies, or a real crisis that he's bravely addressing, or a disaster that Biden left him that's not his fault. But here's the thing. In the real world, you can't fix problems by lying about them. You can't make grocery prices go down by insisting that concerns about grocery prices are a con job. People walk down supermarket aisles every single day. They see the numbers, they do the math, they make the impossible trade-offs between paying bills and feeding their families. And now we're heading into the holidays when those financial pressures become even more acute. People aren't getting their economic information from carefully curated Trump rallies. They're getting it from their own bank accounts. They're getting it from the sticker shock they experience trying to buy Christmas presents. They're getting it from the credit card debt they're accumulating just to maintain their previous standard of living. So while Trump tries to control the narrative and blame the media and attack the coverage, none of that changes the fundamental reality that people are living through an affordability crisis on his watch. And his attempts to shoot the messenger, to distort accurate coverage of these facts and his administration's problems, have reached truly unprecedented levels. He calls it the mess. And apparently he knows there's a problem because he keeps using that word. He just desperately wants everyone to believe he inherited this mess rather than created it. But Trump hasn't just shot the messenger in the metaphorical sense. He's tried to sue the messenger, getting strong-arm settlements from media companies who couldn't afford to fight back. He tried to cancel the messenger with his failed bid to get Jimmy Kimmel fired from ABC. He bullies the messenger constantly, lashing out at reporters with insults and attacks that would have been absolutely shocking and unacceptable in any previous era, but which he's completely normalized. And I want to be specific about this. A significant portion of these attacks are sexist and misogynistic, targeting journalists who happen to be women with language and treatment that should disgust anyone who believes in basic professional respect. But tonight I want to focus on something that goes beyond even all of that, something that takes this to a whole different level of authoritarian behavior. Trump isn't just trying to shoot the messenger or sue the messenger or bully the messenger. He's trying to buy the messenger. And when I say buy, I mean literally purchase media companies and install ownership that will be friendly to him and change coverage to favor his administration. This is where we need to talk about CNN and what's happening right now behind the scenes in one of the biggest corporate battles in American media history. Now, let me be clear about something up front. I'm mentioning CNN specifically because that's what's at stake in this story, but I'm talking about them as our peers, as fellow journalists trying to do their jobs. Yes, they're a competitor. You're watching this channel. Other channels exist. We all understand how this works. But what's happening to them should concern everyone who believes in press freedom and free markets, because the precedent being set here is dangerous for all media. The background is important. There's currently a massive deal in the works where Netflix is trying to buy Warner Brothers for billions upon billions of dollars. This is what The Economist calls a battle for the future of entertainment, and they're not exaggerating. We're talking about control of enormous portions of the media landscape. Warner Brothers isn't just CNN. It's massive movie production, television shows, streaming content, intellectual property that shapes culture and information flow across the country and the world. What they make matters. What they don't make because of political pressure matters just as much. But now there's a hostile bid for Warner Brothers from the Ellison family, specifically David Ellison, backed by his father, Larry Ellison. And if those names sound familiar, they should. Larry Ellison is one of the richest people on the entire planet, right up there with Elon Musk in terms of wealth. And here's where it gets interesting. The Ellisons are major MAGA allies. They've already gotten control of CBS, which led to changes at that network's news division and its 60 Minutes that made journalists uncomfortable enough that some of them resigned in protest. So we've got Netflix currently in the lead to acquire Warner Brothers in what appears to be a normal free market transaction between willing parties. But Trump has apparently decided he wants to interfere in this deal because it would give him an opportunity to influence who owns CNN. According to reporting in the Wall Street Journal, Trump wants to be kept regularly apprised of how the Department of Justice could probe this Netflix deal. He wants to know what regulatory obstacles could be thrown in Netflix's way. He wants to understand how the government could potentially block this transaction. Why? Because David Ellison has reportedly offered assurances to Trump officials that if he bought Warner Brothers, he would make sweeping changes to CNN. Sweeping changes. Let that phrase sink in. We're talking about a potential owner of a major news network making promises to the president about how they would alter that network's coverage and programming. This is exactly the kind of corrupt bargain that the First Amendment was designed to prevent. Now, Ellison did recently say he's talked to Trump but won't speak for him on CNN issues, so we haven't heard his complete side of the story. But Trump apparently admits to people around him that he wants new ownership of CNN and wants changes to their programming. The dots aren't hard to connect here. Trump doesn't like CNN's coverage. Trump has allies who want to buy the company that owns CNN. Those allies have suggested they'd make changes if they got control. And Trump is looking for ways the federal government could intervene in a free market transaction to help his allies get what they want instead of letting the current deal go through. This is what we might call Kimmel Round 2, but with stakes that are exponentially higher. Remember when Trump tried to get Disney to fire Jimmy Kimmel? That was about one late-night comedian on one television show. Disney initially suspended Kimmel indefinitely, but after public pressure, they ultimately brought him back and supported him. The system kind of worked, even if it took citizen action to make it work. But this CNN situation is completely different in scope and scale, because if the Ellisons end up buying Warner Brothers with Trump's help, if the DOJ under Pam Bondi gets weaponized to block Netflix and clear the way for a MAGA-friendly buyer, then the new owners might actually be ready and willing to give Trump exactly what he wants, those programming changes that would turn CNN into something that covers him more favorably. Let me be crystal clear about the constitutional issues here. The First Amendment absolutely bars the government from abusing regulatory power to control press coverage or punish media outlets for journalism the administration doesn't like. You can imagine some tin pot wannabe dictator trying to say, well, if we control tax audits, let's just audit all the media companies that criticize us and make their lives difficult. This is literally something Nixon tried to do, using the IRS to target his political enemies and journalists who exposed his crimes. But the First Amendment and federal laws explicitly ban that kind of behavior. The government cannot use its power to reward friendly media and punish critical media. And yet here we are watching a related type of abuse play out in real time. Trump apparently wants billionaire MAGA allies to get control of CNN with his help. He wants the Department of Justice, which is supposed to operate independently and enforce antitrust laws fairly, to potentially intervene in a corporate merger, not because of legitimate regulatory concerns, but because he doesn't like one network's coverage. This is what Republicans used to criticize as picking winners and losers in the market. We don't do that in America, or at least we're not supposed to. The government shouldn't be putting its thumb on the scale to help certain businesses over others based on political favoritism. Business and media leaders are aghast at what's happening. Some of them are too afraid of Trump's bullying to say so publicly. When you've watched him destroy companies and individuals who crossed him, when you've seen settlements extracted through sheer intimidation, you learn to keep your head down. But others have indicated their concerns, and absolutely nobody in any position of knowledge thinks this is fair or appropriate. This is naked corruption, using governmental power to reshape the media landscape for political benefit. The players involved here tell you everything about the consolidation of power and wealth we're witnessing. You've got Larry Ellison, one of the richest men alive. You've got his family already controlling CBS and making changes to news coverage. You've got Jeff Bezos and his ownership of the Washington Post, where coverage has noticeably shifted. You've got Elon Musk and his various media ventures and his influence over Trump. We're watching billionaire MAGA allies accumulate control over larger and larger portions of American media, and Trump is actively trying to help that process along when it benefits him. And while that battle plays out in boardrooms and at the DOJ, millions of Americans will keep going to grocery stores and seeing prices that shock them. They'll keep struggling to make rent and buy presents for their kids. They'll keep experiencing the affordability crisis that Trump refuses to seriously address. Because at the end of the day, all the media manipulation and all the political theater and all the blame shifting in the world doesn't change what things actually cost. It doesn't make people's paychecks stretch further. It doesn't solve the problems that voters care about most. Trump began this year looking strong. He's ending it looking desperate and flailing. The economic policies aren't working. The public is turning against him. His own voters are telling pollsters things are worse than ever. So instead of changing course, instead of admitting mistakes and trying different approaches, he's doubling down on dishonesty and attempting to manipulate the information Americans receive. He's trying to buy his way out of accountability by buying the messengers. This isn't strength. This isn't effective leadership. This is the behavior of someone who knows they're failing and is desperately trying to hide that failure from public view. And the American people deserve better. They deserve a government that actually tries to address their economic pain rather than just managing how that pain gets reported. They deserve a free press that can hold power accountable without fear of governmental retaliation. They deserve markets that operate fairly without political interference designed to reward friends and punish enemies. What we're watching right now, with Trump in Pennsylvania trying to spin his way out of economic disaster while simultaneously scheming to manipulate media ownership in Washington, this is a president who's lost the plot entirely. He's so focused on controlling the narrative that he's forgotten about governing. So obsessed with his own image that he's abandoned any pretense of serving the public interest. The mess he keeps talking about isn't something he inherited. It's something he created and then tried to lie about and is now desperately trying to prevent Americans from fully understanding by reshaping the media that reports on it. But the truth has a way of coming out eventually. The economic numbers don't lie. The election results speak clearly. The polling shows what people actually think. And no amount of media manipulation changes those underlying realities. Trump can try to buy CNN through his billionaire friends. He can bully journalists and attack coverage and weaponize government agencies. But he can't buy his way out of the consequences of his own failed policies. He can't bully away the affordability crisis that's crushing American families. He can't attack his way to economic success. Pennsylvania tonight was supposed to be Trump taking control of the narrative, showing strength, addressing concerns, proving he has answers. But what it really showed was a president on defense, scrambling to explain away problems he created, attacking anyone who accurately reports on those problems, and scheming behind the scenes to manipulate media ownership so future coverage might be more favorable. That's not leadership, that's desperation, and the American people can see the difference.